Hello and welcome back to the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. In 1995, Oasis departed from the raw energy of Definitely Maybe in favour of a much richer and complex sound. What's the Story, Morning Glory was significant not just for its commercial success, but for its role in defining a cultural and musical movement, perfectly capturing the spirit of Britain in the 90s. Its innovative approach to production, its impact on the Britpop scene, and its anthemic choruses all contributed to it becoming one of the most famous and best-selling albums of all time. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amorim. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Good, yeah, not bad, thank you. Do you want to hear about first world countryside problems?
Yeah, tell me.
It's really hot here today. The sun's out, but I can't open the window because the farmers have spread shit on the fields.
See?
And it stinks. The house stinks. It's like a 3-day thing. They didn't warn
Literally
us.
shit there.
The farmers didn't warn us. No, they just spread their shit how they liked it on the field behind our house. It's going to be 2 or 3 days of it like this, but yeah, it is awful. And I'm hot and I'm sweating and I can't open the window because this thing's a shit.
Yeah.
Hashtag first world countryside
First world
problems.
problem,
yeah, there you go.
First world countryside problems. I like that.
That's what countryside
Specifically
problems. That's what we'll
countryside.
do. Yeah, excellent. You did it right there. If you're okay.
Yeah, it's all good. It's not too hot for my South American standards, so it's all good.
Yeah. Has the Oasis buzz been going around London? Because recently in the news we've learned that Oasis have reuniting, aren't they, for a special tour the middle of next year. So has that been the talk of the town in Soho?
Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about it. I think everyone is talking about it, even people who don't like them. Because I think that's a really interesting thing about Oasis is everyone talks about them, even when they don't like them, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, do you know what? I should start the disclaimer of the show because I don't want people thinking I'm in a bad mood today. I really can't stand Oasis, and I really don't like this album, and I can't stand the Gallagher brothers. However, that doesn't mean I can't be impartial and sort of adequately talk about its place in history. But just in case people think, "Oh, Laz is having a bad day today," he's
having a bad day for many reasons, including talking about Oasis,
countryside problems, Oasis. So actually, Felipe is going to do the monologue at the end of this episode because I kind of thought it'd be a bit disingenuous if I did it.
He refused to do it.
Hold on, yeah, I'm prima donna. I just thought it wouldn't be very true if I sort of was spouting all this good stuff. But in all joking aside, I will be unbiased, I will be impartial because this album is incredibly important and it's incredibly significant to British music, rock music, and Britain in the 90s, I think. So I'll kick off as usual with a bit of info about the album. So the album was released on the 2nd of October 1995, recorded between May and June 1995. We're going to touch on this, but apparently it was only a 2-week recording session. The studio was the Rockfield Studio in Wales. The genre is classed as Britpop, with a secondary genre being out-and-out rock. The length of the album is about 50 minutes long. The label was Creation, and the producers was Owen Morris and Noel Gallagher himself. So I just want to do a bit of background about music in the 90s before we sort of go on to talk about the album itself. So this is a really significant time in the 90s because Britpop is kind of growing. People think Britpop was at its peak between 94 and 97, so 95 is sort of bang in the right place for Britpop to be at its peak. However, it was still a rising genre because we had a resurgence of guitar-based music. If you think about the 80s, so much keyboards, so many synthesized electronic sounds, guitars, keyboards, organs, synthesizers, that actually at the beginning of the 90s, guitar-based music was being resurged, and obviously Britpop was a massive part of that, taking back the raw, energetic rock of the 60s and 70s. The other key thing about Britpop, which actually is only recently I learned about it, is in essence it had its own little duel with grunge in America, which I wasn't aware of. So they kind of saw grunge at the beginning of the 90s. I'm imagining the people in Britain were like, hold on, they've got really good music over there in America. When did they give up all the synthesizers and crappy electronic music of the 80s? When did they get guitar music back? You've got the likes of Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, all really doing the grungy stuff in America.
And it's all guitar-based.
All guitar-based, all emotional lyrics, all introspective, heartfelt lyrics instead of the cheesy 80s stuff we had before. And I think Britpop was a generational cultural answer to America's grunge. Now, Britpop is way more upbeat and happy than grunge. It's way more melodic. I feel like it has way more of a character and a popness to it. But still, they were sort of fighting each other, you know, in terms of grunge in America, Britpop in England.
So, what do you think is the one particular element that makes Britpop properly British as opposed to grunge, which is essentially American? What do you think it is? Because I have an opinion on that.
I would go on. I want to hear your opinion.
I think it's the humor, isn't it? There's a touch of humor, as I said. Like the
grunge is very
grunge
serious.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like my dad hates me, life is crap.
Yeah,
I want to sing about this. I want to cry. I want to kill myself. Some people in Italy did that, which is really sad. Anyway, but what I'm saying is, the Britpop stuff is like, yeah, here we are, you know, bringing the guitars back to pop music, and we're going to be as loud as the grunge guys, but maybe we're not that miserable. Maybe we're just going to make a little bit of a joke out of all of this.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
That's a great point, and I think later when we get to you've got stuff to say about the lyrics and themes of the album, right?
Yeah.
We'll do it later then, because I want to touch on something they call Cool Britannia. So we'll come to that later, but that'll explain a little bit about what we said. But yeah, I think things were in a really good place in Britain, and that's what we'll come on to later. The world was Britain was a bit carefree in those times. Things were all going really well, so I think people actually had the opportunity to sit back and say, "Look how cool life is." You know, in America, I'm not sure financially, politically, what was going on in the 90s, the early 90s in America. But you do wonder if the product of grunge, if the result of grunge was a product of its time. And I think music and politics, although we try not to sort of mar them on this show and give political opinions, undoubtedly they always hand in hand, because the politics of the time will often be reflected in the music. Now, it may not necessarily be pop music, the music that's being played on the radio every day, but in underground scenes like heavy metal and grunge, you will see the politics come out. So in Britain, things were good. Things were really happy. Everyone was sort of living a good life. And as you said, this Britpop movement kind of just put a bit of humour into it and said, "Come on, let's take a look at the funny side of Britain."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can definitely see that, hear that in the lyrics and the overall approach of Britpop. And although there's this like a reputation of people in the UK to be really sad or a little bit miserable or complain about stuff, you can see a lot of happiness in the 90s and can see a lot of
prosperity.
Yeah, prosperity, and that's reflected on the music for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, let's talk about the music. So going into that, you know, this album, we got 4 different topics we're going to talk about: the recording and production, the sound of the album, the influences, and the releases. I think we should go for the releases first, because when I look at a perfect way to release singles of an album, I look at this.
Yeah.
The album was released, when did we say? October. Yeah, 2nd of October, 95. 24th of April, they released Some Might Say.
Yeah.
14th of August, they released Roll With It. 18th of September, they released Morning Glory. 30th of October, so the album's now out, they released Wonderwall. 19th of February, 96, they did Don't Look Back in Anger. And 13th of May, 96, Champagne Supernova. So 1 year, almost, let's call it 11 months. 11 months with a single, like, sort of every 2 months. That's how you market an album, and that undoubtedly has led to how the success of this album in terms of sales. Because it seems to me you couldn't get away from it. All these singles, and you started to enjoy Oasis's new single, Some Might Say. 3 months later, they got another one out. Roll With It.
Yeah. Also, you have to have the same kind of you have to have some sort of quality control for that, right?
Yeah.
If you pick the wrong songs. Although the album's got a lot of good songs, well-written songs and potential hits, if you don't pick the right ones and release them in the best order, you might not make the best out of the album. And I think whoever was in charge of it in the label, they definitely got this one right.
They did, didn't they? Because the 3 biggest songs that, I mean, I think it's arguable, but I think you'd agree with me, Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, and Champagne Supernova are the 3 titans from this album, right?
Yeah.
Because although you've got songs like Some Might Say, Roll With It, She's Electric, that are still famous, those 3, I mean, you and me know from how many wedding and pub gigs we've played.
Oh, yeah.
You will always finish the gig with Wonderwall. And
Yeah.
if not, it
Or
will be Don't Look Back in
Don't Look
Anger.
Back in Anger. You got to play those songs.
And
People
Champagne
love it.
Supernova is almost always in the DJ set after the wedding. So it's like these three, they're the titans of these songs, and they are literally timeless songs because they are still being played, what are we now, 30 years later.
30 years
So it's really, really impressive. But and then to have those three come out after the album's been released, it's just a little trick of genius, isn't it? Because you're kind of teasing people in with, some might say, Roll With It, Morning Glory. And then when the album's released and people realise, oh, Wonderwall's a banger, oh, Don't Look Back in Anger's really good, release them as singles, put something different on, get a new video in, get a new look to the songs, and then you're going to get them played and bought infinitely more.
Yeah.
Very impressive, isn't it, marketing scheme?
It is. It is.
Anything, about
Yeah,
the
one
singles?
thing about the are we talking about the recording? And
Let's
you're in
do- yeah.
charge of the subject.
No, let's
here,
do
Matt.
it. Let's do it. Let's go to let's
So
go into
yeah, the
recording.
recording. So the interesting thing about the recording is Noel Gallagher claims that they actually recorded in 12 days. So if you say it's about 2 weeks, as you said, you have to consider that it takes maybe a whole day to get the drum sound right, and it takes maybe another whole day to check the microphones and the amps and try the guitar tones and stuff like that. It takes ages to do those things. But he claimed that they've recorded one song per day, which is really remarkable in terms of like doing all the instruments of a song in one day.
Yeah.
Especially considering that he said half of the songs were not even written by the time they go into the studio. So that is
Wow. I mean, that's the key to some good songwriting, isn't it? That's the
So
not key. That's a sign of good songwriting, showing that you can come with a song that's not even fully finished, get it recorded in one day, but also finish the structure of them.
And you know what that means to me? Maybe when you do that, you don't have time to overthink the arrangements. And I think the way they play it, I don't know if you have this opinion on their music. It's like, when someone shows you, so I've just written the song, they play the acoustic guitar and they sing on top of it, and that's it. Oasis sounds like it's just one step after that. They just plug that guitar, they just do it with an electric guitar and put a drum and bass beat to it and just get to the end of the song, and that's it. That's a very simplistic way of defining what they do with arrangements, but essentially is what they do. Wonderwall is a specific case where they have some strings. I think they have a cello. There's some stuff going on.
But
there's some clever ideas in there, but they're very, very subtle.
But that stuff can be done afterwards, or getting an orchestra in the studio. In terms of what you're talking about, I read the same, that they did this in 2 weeks because they spent no time overthinking, second guessing, questioning what they did. They just went with their ideas, probably finished it off in the same way as well, just thinking, oh, let's not overthink this ending, let's just get it done so we can end the song and move on to the next one. I also read that the environment in Rockfield Studios, now Led Zeppelin have recorded, no, it's Led Zeppelin, Queen, Black Sabbath, they've all recorded there, and this is a Rockfield Studios in Wales. The rural countryside apparently lent it to Oasis in being a very casual, laid-back recording session. Apparently things were very sweet as in, sweet man, as in like, the really cool, laid-back environment where they were able to immerse themselves in the album. And we know from experience, you and me, that this works. When you're doing a recording session in London, it's horrible. And because you're listening, you're on the bus or the tube, you're going to the gig, you're sort of getting squashed by people, you can't sit down on the tube, you've got your headphones in, listening to the demo, trying to, what's it called, ghost play, trying to remember your part. But then you've got to think, where's my stop, am I getting off here? Then you've got to use City Mapper to walk to the studio. Whereas when we record,
and there's always a diversion on the bus.
that's always, it's never straightforward.
Or the train gets stuck, and
exactly.
Whatever.
But you and me know, we went and recorded an album in Devon, in the countryside, and we rented a house out, and it was fantastic because we just went there. It was 5 minutes from the studio. We came back each night, and we just sort of relaxed, ordered a bit of takeaway, knew that we needed to be in the studio 10 a.m. the next day, had this lovely, it was like a forest, wasn't it, woods behind us. And it was just lovely. You take your head out of the everyday life and you put it into the album. And because of that, you get exquisite performances, you get dedication. Not that you don't dedicate a performance in London, but your mind is elsewhere, isn't it?
Exactly. I think
committed playing.
Yeah, on top of that, you've got to consider they already had one big album. They did really well with the first album. And so you've got the money, you've got the time, you've got the energy, the creativity. And you don't have, a lot of people fiddling on their phones like people do.
Right. Look,
this
sorry,
thing about.
sorry. The Definitely Maybe was recorded in Manchester, so studios in Manchester,
Yeah,
Wales, Cornwall, Liverpool, and London.
yeah,
It's no
it's
surprise that with
completely
the
different.
second
Yeah.
album, they wanted to be like, let's just choose one place and
And be
settle
there
down for
for a
the two
couple of
weeks.
weeks
Yeah,
and get the album done. And they
yeah,
were probably touring at the time. Maybe that's the reason for the tight schedule.
yeah,
It happens.
yeah.
Um,
But so just about the recording, and then to add to that, they apparently I read that they did a lot of live takes with minimal
mhm.
overdubs, and I think you can hear that in the album. It sounds like a rock and roll band.
It does, yeah. It sounds like a garage band, as we normally say, because like, oh, that's an expression that probably comes from America, where most bands actually rehearse in garage.
Yeah,
And but I love that kind of vibe. A bunch of people playing together. Sometimes they are at different levels musically, but they can play together and sound good as a band.
yeah.
And when we're going to put an album together, that's what matters. It's not like the individual talent or whatever. It's just sound good as a group.
Mm.
And I think they do sound good as a group in this album. And as I said, it sounds like a band. Guitar, bass, drums, vocals is very straightforward in that sense. I
Yeah,
think that's the rock and rollness of the album, is the fact that it's playable by anyone pretty much. If you have two guitars, bass, and drums, and you start a band, you can play any song from this album straight away
yeah.
without missing any essential elements of the song.
One thing that is at the forefront of the album is definitely the guitars and the vocals, isn't it? And this is what
Yeah,
we call the wall of sound, where it's
yeah,
a sort of production technique where you focus very heavily on some defining features. And in this case, it's obviously the guitar and the vocals.
yeah,
They are first and foremost at the front of the album. The guitar riff and the vocals are what matters most.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And it
And
gives that punchy, energetic feel, doesn't it?
exactly. And one thing that happens with them is like you probably when you hear like distorted guitars, what you normally have is a power chord which has two or three notes. Am I right?
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah. So when you play, still remember playing power chords on guitar, but what they do a lot is like the whole chord, like is that's why I said like it's like playing acoustic guitar but with distortion.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So they normally play the whole chord, not only the simplified power chord, which is common in rock music, and it makes it sound a bit. Maybe it sounds a bit messy sometimes, but that's
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yeah.
But it's what AC/DC does,
Yeah.
in a
And
complete different style. But
well, it's a characteristic, it's a personality of the album, isn't it?
yeah,
Well, let's talk about the sound of the album then, in terms of like the songs and everything. So, definitely, maybe was so much more raw, punky, energetic. We move over here, and we've got a much more polished,
production.
melodic sound to the album, haven't we? I think of Wonderwall, and again, I'm not going to go on about what I don't like about this album, but I can't stand this song. Every time we used to play it at functions, I had to sit my way through it. It was the last song of the night, and I'd be like, I can't fucking wait to go home. Like, just, oh, and now I've got to do this. But the strings on Wonderwall are fantastic. They really give me kind of Eleanor Rigby vibes, just with how it's almost like if you took the strings out, it would be a different song.
Yeah, can I say something about the arrangement in this song?
Yeah, of course.
The strings, they start on the second verse, right? So there's a whole verse with just that. I love when you add layers one by one, and it's a simple production, I'd say, idea that works really well in pretty much any songs. So you start with just guitar, actually just guitar, and then the vocals, and then the whole band comes in. When the second verse starts, you would expect the drum beats to be there right away, and the strings start, and there's a drum fill, and the beat starts on the second line of the second verse.
Yeah.
So it's like the drummer is one bar late intentionally.
Yeah.
So you have the second. Yeah, it's just like wow.
It creates a sense of
yeah.
It's like tension, not musical tension where the two notes don't match, but you're like, hold on, something's missing. But like you're still vibing with the verse, and suddenly the drums come back in, and you're like, yes, that's
yeah, exactly. It's actually super clever, that one. Again, it's those subtleties they make an album sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure if I listen to this album in 10 years, I'm going to find some other element like that and think, oh, I didn't notice that.
I think if I had to sum up the album, it would be catchy hooks, memorable melodies, and anthemic choruses.
Yeah.
When you think of the intro of She's Electric, that guitar, the diddle 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 diddle. You know, it's kind of, you just sat
Yeah.
there. It's a bit, you're not sure where it's going until suddenly it drops into the verse. Memorable melodies again. The verses, choruses, everything. The melodies are very simplistic, and then the anthemic choruses. I mean, is there a more anthemic chorus? And this is where I get to say the part I want to say. Despite everything I said, and despite my thoughts on Oasis, the album, and the brothers, my statement is, Don't Look Back in Anger is one of the greatest songs ever written by a British band. Ever.
Yeah.
Beatles included, anyone.
And it's
It
not a matter
stunning.
of like,
It is stunning, man. It is a stunning song. And I think the whole reason I went on to this is because of anthemic choruses. I can't think of a more anthemic chorus. People will say, you know, Mr. Brightside or, I don't know, Sweet Home Alabama. But I think in terms of passion, emotion, and feel that you can hear them sing into that chorus, doesn't get much better than that song.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about that song is they wrote the song, I think, without having all the lyrics and just jamming, playing at sound checks. I think Noel mentioned something about, I think it's his kid or some kid said, "Oh, what are you singing there?" It was just like mumbling the lyrics, like making it up, or there was no actual lyrics. I said, "Are you saying Soul? Is that Soul Sally Can't Wait?" So it's like the,
And So Sally Can Wait.
yeah.
That's
So that he wasn't saying that; he was saying something else. I said, "Oh, you know what? That's what I'm going to say from now on."
And it's those little touches that make a song special.
Yeah,
isn't it?
but essentially what he said is the song is about not regretting whatever you did wrong in the past, and that's what it is. Wonderwall is for his wife, but she was his girlfriend at the time, and is about, I think she was having a hard time, and he was like, no, you need to be there for me, you need to be strong, so because I'm always like in pieces all the time. So basically he was saying like you know, don't worry about whatever happened, and because I needed to be there for me as well, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's real life stuff, right? That's why I like those songs, because they know,
Down to
although
earth.
they might have a pretentious attitude sometimes, the songwriting not necessarily doesn't necessarily reflect that every time.
Yeah.
I think some of the songs are just like, this is me talking about my life, and I think everyone can relate to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of instrumentation used, the reason I disagree, no, I don't disagree. The reason that I'd say it's more than just rock is because we get a lot more. We get lots of acoustic guitar and piano throughout the album, and not individual little spots through most of the songs. Some songs, you know, Oasis, especially this album, they have this formula where they get a verse. Let's say they're playing at like 70% intensity for the verse. They'll then bring it down to 50% for the pre-chorus, like build, you know, I'm going back to Don't Look Back in Anger. So I start a revolution from my bed. And then when the time for the chorus comes in, they whack it up to like 90% intensity. They throw in lots of stuff, like piano, acoustic guitars, even some orchestral stuff as well. And I think that's a really cool aspect of it, because it does take it to the next step further than rock.
Yeah, one thing you have in that music is a lot of percussion, a lot of tambourines, which and shakers and that stuff, and that, for me, that comes from the Beatles. The Beatles had a lot of that.
I'm glad you made that segue. Let's talk about the influences.
Yeah.
First of all, is there any other songs you wanted to talk about, or any other aspects?
I just want to say there's one song that is my particular favorite song in the album. She's Electric, because I love this song that kind of breaks the mood of the album. It's in the middle of the album. It's got nothing to do with the rest of it, in my opinion. It's got like that shuffle vibe. Sounds a little bit like Beatles to me. And the lyrics are just like funny, and I like it. She's Electric is a great song, in my opinion. It's not underrated. It's a well-known song for anyone who's an Oasis fan.
Yeah.
So, but it's for me, it's as good as the singles.
Main three, yeah.
Yeah.
Influences. So I think you might have answered the question I was going to ask you, but out of the four big pop bands of the 60s, the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, and the who would you liken Oasis to the most, and why?
I would say Beatles and Stones, but there's a little bit of T-Rex as well.
Yeah, good point. Why? Because a lot of people
the riffs
give a criticism of Oasis. Oh, they're just copying the Beatles. I see the argument for that, and even though I have the reason to make that argument, I don't agree with it.
No, I don't think it's just like copy and paste. Because if you say that, right, if you say that they're copying someone, so tell me exactly which song was.
I'm going to answer you.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So if you say like this song sounds like the Beatles, so which song exactly?
I will point
If it
to one
sounds
example.
generic like the Beatles, then it's an influence, right? Not.
You know the end of She's Electric?
Yeah.
Does it sound like the end of Little Help from My Friends?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm joking. As in, that's the only
But
time
that's
I
fine.
can
But
point
that's
and
not
say
that's
that
not
feels
that
like a
essential to
copy.
the song, isn't it?
No,
Like,
exactly. It's the end. It's the end. And sorry, just a note for listeners and viewers: any song we mention is going to be down in the show notes in a dedicated playlist, so you can listen either before the show or after the show or with us. You got the full album in there, plus any little song we mention. So please carry on, Felipe.
And specifically, that's a shuffle beat, like with a little help from my friends.
Yeah.
Same sort of groove.
Yeah. Excellent. The sound. I think. Yeah. So the influences. I mean, the Beatles stuff. A lot of people make the comparison. I think it's fair, and I heard in this album quite a lot of stuff. The chord progressions. Now, when we think of pop music now, and being very generalizing, you think of 4 chords. You think of chord 1, chord 4, chord 5, maybe chord 6. Getting a little bit musical theory here. These are the chords that bands like the Beatles, especially in their early days, made up and made so familiar. You know, and there's a song called, if you can find it on YouTube, it's called the 4 chord song, A minor, G, C, and D minor, or D major. And it shows how many songs have been written with these 4 chords as the root of the song. But here, I hear lots of different stuff, like in the song Hey Now, when he sings the line, no time for running away now, the song just takes a little turn. It's 1 chord, but it just takes a turn that makes you go, ooh, that's not what I was expecting. And the Beatles do that a lot, and I thought that's what I heard in here. Descending bass lines, I think they do it in Don't Look Back in Anger, so it's like, you know, do, 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 and they bass chords around that.
Which works as a preparation for a chorus sometimes. Or
works all over the place. The Beatles did it, they used it, James Taylor uses it a lot, singer-songwriters, they love that. The other thing, simplistic melodies and solos. There's not one solo on this album I heard where you think, he's trying to be flashy here. It's always delivering for the song.
Yeah, and the solo is normally like a composition as well. It's just not like it's not playing random notes.
That's what I heard that I could tie to the Beatles. With the Stones, I didn't hear that much. Maybe the energy, the attitude, the rock and rollness. But the intro to Some Might Say, it's got a little bluesy touch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which I think here are the Stones. The Who, I think this is where the attitude and energy comes in, because you've got the distorted guitars, the heavy drums, the kind of hard rock aspects of it, the rock and roll lifestyle, the headbanging, I imagine. And the Kinks, brothers. That's the comparison I found. You know, the Kinks, Ray and is it John? Ray and John Davies, I think, were brothers. Like, they didn't have a good relationship as far as I'm aware, and the same as Oasis. So I think it's cool that, you know, it's fair as a let's call me a hater of Oasis. I think it's so easy for me to come in and say, oh, they're just copying the Beatles. But actually, when you think about it, they really have taken certain aspects from each of these bands, whether it's the attitude of the Who and the Stones, the musical influences from the Kinks and the Beatles. It's you can only admit that they have made their own brand of music. And although it might sound a little bit like the Beatles in places, it's still original.
If we had Noel Gallagher in the show, what would you say to him?
I feel like my integrity I would be more than happy to say, Noel, I don't like the music and I don't like the album, but I'm really, you know, but I respect you, because how can you? This is,
well, you did it really well.
How can you not respect it, man? Like, you know, this is where I feel like our show. I don't want to say it stands out, because I don't want to say that no one else does this, but look at what we're doing. We're doing an album. I chose the album because I know how important it is. Actually, I listened to the album a few years ago and I was like, no, I don't really like it. Listened to it in depth this week and actually, I hate it. But I'm still here giving an impartial, unbiased opinion on it, you know. And I think that, you know, this is what we got to do. You know, if people come and listen to us as ex-musicians, as pro musicians, for an opinion on just 2 regular guys who tour the world, we play music, we love music, we've got to be honest, but at the same time, you've got to give credit where it's due. There's plenty of albums by big bands that I don't like that we will do
Yeah.
on this show, but I can't take it away from them, man.
Well, there's a difference
it's an
between
album.
there's a difference between your tasting music and what you believe is good and remarkable or important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Excellent.
And that's what it is.
Go on.
One thing I want to say about the album cover. You know the building at the end.
Oh, go on. Yeah, go on. Now, hold on. For those watching, wait, can you see my mouse on the screen or not?
No, I can't see.
Right.
You have
So
to
I'm going to
point
use my finger. It's this one, isn't it? Right.
This building, yeah.
So for viewers on YouTube, watch that building and that window. Go on, Felipe. Tell him.
I lived in that room on the top for 2 years.
That one.
Yeah.
Yes, you did, and I visited you several times.
It's probably the most rock and roll thing about my life is that I lived in a rock album's cover.
Not that you're one of the most sought after blues drummers in Soho, or that you're gigging literally 7 nights a week.
No,
it's that you lived in that. Yeah.
I lived in an album cover. That's super cool. A couple of things about this.
One day I'm going to superimpose your face on that, and I'll give you a vinyl. I'll be like, "Hey, Felipe, there you go." And you won't notice until you look one day, and you're like, "Oh, Laz has stuck a picture of my face in it."
Yeah. No, check this out. There's an interesting thing about this. So that's Berwick Street in Soho, and you might wonder why people from Manchester would do an album cover in London. Basically, I think they used to go there and shop, CDs, buy CDs, vinyls, like proper records. So the road is famous for the record shops, and I think that was the reason why they decided to do the album there. You have a man in the background, apart from the two guys in the front, who are not the Gallagher brothers, by the way. On that side, that man, he's covering his face with something. Can you see that? So that man is the producer of the album, and that thing is the master tape of the album.
No way.
Yeah, the object he's using to cover his face is the master tape of the album. Nice touch, isn't it?
Is this Noel and Liam?
No, that's a DJ and a designer. They have nothing to do with the band, I guess, or I think they are. Maybe the designer worked on the album. I don't know, but they're not them. Yeah.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, that's cool stuff. So their headline: Felipe lived in the album cover of "What's the Story, Morning Glory."
That's it. That's my claim to fame.
Let's move on to the. Do you have anything else to say about the music?
No.
So let's move on to the themes and the lyrics of the album. And I know you always touch on lyrics. Before you do, though, before you talk about some certain lyrics of the album, I want to shape what I was talking about Britain in the 90s. This is an era we called Cool Britannia, because Britain was in a great place. Now, let's just explain some points. So this is post-Thatcher. Thatcher was in power for, was it 12 or 13 years? And it ended in the early 90s. Britain had a desire for something new. It had become very stale under Thatcher through the 80s, that when New Labour and Tony Blair came into power, for good or for bad, whatever side of the fence you sit on, it was new, and it brought a hope to Britain that actually our country can be a bit different. There was a renewed sense of national pride, cultural confidence, and essentially economic optimism around Britain. People were happy, and Britain became proud of itself and what it had to offer the world. And in the arts department, it flourished everywhere. In music, you had the Britpop that was a nostalgic nod back to the 60s. It wasn't like, oh, let's try this new electronic stuff of the 80s. Let's do what we're good at and take it back to what it was like in the 60s. In fashion, you had the likes of Alexander McQueen, Stella McCartney, Vivienne Westwood doing their thing. In art, you had Damien Hirst and Tracey Emin. In movies, you had Danny Boyle and Guy Ritchie, movies like Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels that were quintessentially so British. And just as well as that, a general sense of celebrating Britishness through celebrity culture, magazines and media. Britain was apparently a good place to be. I was born halfway through it. I was born in the 1995, so I couldn't experience it. But there was a pride about it, and this is why we had the rise of Britpop and bands, and we mentioned it in the Stereophonics episode as well, bands singing about British life. They were happy. I mean, I know not all the areas were economically prosperous, and it's not like everything was perfect.
But culturally, it was a happy moment.
Culturally, it was a happy moment. For all the negatives, you still wanted to sing about how proud you were about being British.
Yeah,
and so with that in mind, please talk to us about the lyrics.
One thing I noticed, like in regards to that, is like first time I went to America, I saw flags everywhere, and it's like the USA flag everywhere. And in Britain, you don't see people waving the flag that much. You don't see too many flags. It's not a typical thing in this country. And apparently, in the Britpop era, it was kind of a thing to have the Union Jack everywhere, right? And in guitars and in shops and everything. So that's an interesting thing from that time. Yeah. So the lyrics, I actually have a couple of lines that I really like from "Don't Look Back in Anger,"
Yeah, let's do it.
Which I think is, if you young at that time listening to rock music, that's what you want to hear. I love this. I'm gonna start a revolution from my bed. It's just like such a teenage thing to say. And don't put your life in the hands of a rock and roll band, which they were doing. I think it's an amazing choice of words. It's really clever.
It just had this way of mixing emotions and romance and actual emotional feels, like we said they were doing in America with grunge, but making it a bit funnier, a bit simplistic, a bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah, there's a quote from Noel in 1995 speaking to NME magazine about Champagne Supernova, which I love this song. I think it's a great. That's an interesting point. Is a really strong song to close an album. You know, sometimes you're going to have a filler at the end of the album, and that's one thing that really upsets me. If I listen to a whole album and it's great, and the last couple of songs are kind of average, it makes me feel bad. Champagne Supernova, as one of their best songs ever, being at the end of the album, it's a great choice. I don't know if it was the last one to be recorded or whatever, but it was an amazing choice to put it in the end of the album. So basically, Noel Gallagher talking about that song, he said, it means different things when I'm in different moods. So when I'm in a bad mood, being caught beneath a landslide is like being suffocated. So I think the other thing he said is like, it's about when you're young and you see people in groups and you think about what they did for you and they did nothing. So it's about, like, you think you belong to a group, but maybe you don't. Maybe they don't care about you. So it's an individual reflection on life, I guess. And as I said, it might mean different things for himself. So imagine if you're listening to that songs, any song from this album, it might mean whatever you want it to mean. If the songwriter himself says, well, it can mean different things in different days. So that's one of the greatest things about the album is the lyrics are clever, but not overcomplicated and kind of open to interpretation. So
and I think I said it already, they're tongue in cheek. They're very, I don't want to say they're funny because they're not all funny, but
some of them
they make you smile, I think. I think you can read them and they make you smile. Awesome. So let's finish up with the accolades and the legacy of this album. So 22 million claimed sales. That's a lot. It's a lot. It's gone on to become the 5th highest selling album in the UK. So it's not the 5th highest selling album by a UK band in the UK.
In the UK. So even compared to American artists,
everyone else,
that's insane.
The album, the legacy of the album is so important and significant because it didn't really innovate or pioneer anything that wasn't going on in the years before. I suppose maybe you could argue it polished up the sound. The orchestras were kind of a bit different to how raw and energetic the rest of Britpop was. But this album became synonymous with the Britpop movement and the cool Britannia. It just signified a moment in time where Britons were proud to be British. They were happy with, in general, how life was going. There was a sense of renewed optimism and cultural pride about it. And this album stood as that landmark. You've got timeless hit singles like Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, Champagne Supernova, as well as ones everyone knows like Roll With It, She's Electric, what's the other one, Some Might Say. I think these songs resonated with the British fans because it did define their lifestyle in the 90s, and people just connect with that, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And it defines an era in music, and it does it well. I think, and also I would say the quality of the songwriting is still the most relevant thing about the album, because as I said, there's not that much innovation in terms of production. It's interesting, but it's not like, wow, the pop music was changed forever because of this production, I would say. So it's still more about the quality of the songs and the way the band sounded than anything else. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I agree. There's a sorry, before you go on, I
Yeah,
just
no.
wanted to say there's a chord in Don't Look Back in Anger, which when I used to play it at functions, I think it was very simple to just play. I don't know. I think it was like an F in the as a root note. But I remember looking at the chord, and it was something crazy. It was like a jazzy chord. It's so I start a revolution from my bed. It's the first chord. It's something like, I'm not even going to try and remember it, but it's weird. It's like an F sharp 5 with a C in the bass or something.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that, and when I first started, you know, you remember me, we were playing our jazz band, weren't we? And we were loving all these chords. And I just played this arpeggio over that chord that should not have worked because it was dissonant. It wasn't nice. It was a jazz chord I was playing. I should have just been playing a root note, but I played the whole chord, but it just worked. And I thought, that is special. That I'm here playing as an A minor followed by a G major. It's all very predictable. And suddenly, this augmented jazz chord pops up and presents a real sense of tension. And you hear it, he goes, because the tension is in the first part. So I start a revolution. That's the tension. And then it resolves from my bed. And it's just so simplistic, but so key to have picked that chord and made it work. I've said before, I love that song. I love that song. It's stunning.
It's a great song.
But yeah, sorry, you were in the middle of saying something.
No, I was just saying that the chord progressions they're kind of simple, but there's always a bit of a surprise. You know,
Yeah, that's what I
every
said
now and
earlier
then
about
they
that.
throw one chord. It's like,
yeah.
well, it's simple, but it's not that predictable.
Yeah,
You know, which is
agree.
great. Yeah.
And the final point to make is just that, you know, this album and ultimately this band would go on to influence the likes of Arctic Monkeys, Coldplay, you know, the Killers, who were an American band, came out and said, this is one of our biggest influences.
Wow, great.
There you go.
See, and well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are you buying a ticket for the reunion tour?
I was just going to move on to that part. I said, let's talk about the reunion. Do you know what? I haven't seen the prices yet, but I considered it to go and hear Don't Look Back in. I can't stress enough how much I love that song, which is crazy considering I'm telling you all how much I hate the album.
And I have a friend who hates Oasis. He loves Wonderwall.
There you go. It's the same thing. Yeah.
I know how annoying the song is, but it's such a masterpiece of pop music.
My
issue, like those guys, they should have existed just to write that song.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. My issue with those kind of gigs is the crowd is going to be huge. But I said to my wife, I was like, well, you know, I can't stand Wonderwall. So when they finish with that, we'll get out early. But no, I'm not going to go. I think ultimately the price will be too much. I don't want. Do you know what? It wouldn't be fair. Someone else could have that ticket and really appreciate it.
A proper fan.
And I'm not going, I could go like Oasis. I'm not going to the show. I'm just saying, though, a real fan should be able to take this, not just me, because I can afford it and I want to go see one song. That's a bit disingenuous. So, no, I'm not going to go. What about yourself? Do you fancy it?
Nah, well, I will wait.
You're the master, but you're the master of getting random tickets to crazy events. Because you went to see Eric Clapton a few months ago out of nowhere.
Exactly. I was invited.
You knew a guy who knew Clapton, But you went to see Scorpions as well because you got that ticket randomly.
That wasn't so random. I wanted to go to that gig.
Okay. So, but who knows, man? You might.
But maybe someone is going to get me a ticket to the Oasis gig. You guys listening to the show now, get me a ticket. I'll be happy.
What do you think about the reunion anyway? I mean, in general.
I think well, maybe someone needs, or maybe one of them got into a mortgage for a mansion, or they want to buy new cars, which are great reasons to get a band together. Also, I think they wanted that break, despite all the fights might be real, might not. I don't care. The thing is, it's good to do your own thing, like solo careers and stuff, and eventually recognize that you have a legacy, and they've created some amazing stuff together, and it's totally fine that they back doing it. And I don't think anyone is complaining unless you really hate the music, which in any case, you can't get away from it. Yeah.
They are two big personalities, aren't they? And I think when, I haven't followed anything about their arguments, but I can imagine it led to multiple clashes, and they probably needed the break, and if they think now's the right time to come back, then cool.
One thing that we can definitely say is, if it wasn't for this particular album, they wouldn't be big enough to do a reunion decades later and still be
I think it's
if
been
not
trending.
as relevant as back in the day, even more relevant now.
I think it's been trending on Twitter for 3 days now in number one spot. Oasis.
No, it's insane.
So there's a market for it. There's a market for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, cool. I mean, I'm really happy for the Oasis fans, honestly. Like, if I'm trying to think of one of my favourite bands that don't exist anymore, and that I wish they'd come together. You know, do you know what I mean? If they could, not like I know.
Well, when Led Zeppelin came together again in 2007, I was really happy. Couldn't get a ticket though, but anyway.
I think that was like gold dust, wasn't it? But anyway, so thank you for joining us. Is that it? Anything else you want to say?
Oh, well, I have a monologue.
Oh God, I forgot. So
see?
Felipe's taken my monologue because, like I said, I thought it wouldn't be right for me to do it. So please go on, give us your monologue.
I mean, I obviously lack the academic English skills that you have, so my monologue's not going to be that great. I don't apologize for that.
Don't sell yourself short. You talk really well. Go for it.
So here we go. What's the Story? Morning Glory proved that Oasis could write even more impactful hit songs than the ones from their extremely successful debut album. As a consequence, they have created a legacy that outlived the Britpop era and kept attracting followers and haters from all over the world. Sing-along choruses, simple but clever chord progressions, distorted guitars, and an instantly recognizable vocal style are some of the reasons that made this album a huge success. Most critics would claim that Oasis has never produced anything as good as What's the Story? Morning Glory, and I agree with them. In my humble opinion, this is a singular moment in the band's history where the quality of their music has spoken much louder than their rock and roll attitude or controversial interviews. From the release of the album to this day, it's virtually impossible to go to a party, wedding, or pub gig in the UK without listening to one of the Oasis hit songs. They have definitely written their names into pop music history with Champagne Supernova, Wonderwall, and Don't Look Back in Anger. This is Oasis in all their glory, pun intended. They might be too pop for a rock band, or maybe their attitude is too rock for the pop music industry, but they probably don't give a flying fuck about that anyway.
Brilliant. Is that it? Brilliant, man. That was really good. Do you know the part I agreed with most and the part I enjoyed is that when I was growing up and I didn't know that this was an Oasis album, or I didn't know what songs were on it, all I heard was about the brothers because they were always in the media fighting, or just one had released a new album or whatever. You're right when you said this album superseded any argument or public thing they ever had. And there's a famous gig, isn't it, Oasis at Nebworth?
Yeah.
Anything that came out, anything that you ignore that isn't an album, public feuds, special gigs, reunions, this and that, you are right when you said this album trumps them all.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so iconic, because you might have an album that wasn't as good, and actually after they released that album, the brothers had a public spat and one of them hit the other one, and that becomes the big news. With this, nothing was ever going to top it because the songs are so well written, they're so well crafted, and they're performed with the same energy, rawness, and punkiness that the fans loved from the first album, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like in rock and pop music, you have personalities, big personalities, big characters that become celebrities. That's what it is. If you're in a famous band, you're a celebrity, and sometimes people care too much about that. So it's all about what's in the news, what this guy said about the other guy.
The music was the focus here,
and
wasn't it?
I really love when people put together an album that the music can really speak louder than anything else, and they did that really well with this album.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Let us know your thoughts on the album in the comments. And if you're going to grab a ticket to see them next year, it's very exciting times. I think they go on sale on Saturday, so 2 days from now. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like and a subscribe so you can stay up to date with our content, our shorts, our new episodes. And if you're listening on Amazon, Spotify or Apple, do us a favour, scroll down, give us a little rating, write us a little review. It takes about 30 seconds of your time, but does the world of good for us because we'll be thrown up the charts, we'll be shown to more rock and roll fans like yourself, and hopefully we'll make this show grow. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for being with us again. And thanks for anyone who has listened to any of the episodes or downloaded the episodes. It's really, really good to have you guys on board. Thanks a lot. Well, so keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
As usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.